back everyone for our fourth practice talk session at this year's process mining camp. We are happy to welcome today's speaker, Nelleke Smits from a.s.r. Hello, Nelleke.
Yeah. Hello, Anne. Good to be here.
Great to have you here, and everyone is working from home, of course, these days. So do you get to do much process mining at all at the moment?
Well, in the beginning, I really had to get used to this working at home part. But I must say, actually, recently we started to go back to the office again for a bit. So now we're into some sort of blended working situation, and I'm really getting used to it. So we're starting to get some more process mining cases, and it's really exciting.
All right. Okay. Well, you have 3 cases for us today,
Yes.
and I'm very curious about your presentation. So please start now.
Thank you. Yes, so 3 cases to discuss, a lot to get into today, but let's take some time and dive into these process mining cases. My name is Nelleke. I'm a trainee and process miner at a.s.r. And today I'll be addressing how I try to set up a successful process mining structure in a decentralized organization. Because this past year pretty much has been a full focus in trying to set up process mining. But before we dive into the juicy process mining details, I first want to introduce a.s.r. to you. So a.s.r. is a Dutch insurance company, and we actually found its origin 300 years ago. Now, many name changes and mergers have followed, which finally resulted in the a.s.r. brand, constituting of several sub-brands. We're located in the center of the Netherlands, and we have around 4,000 employees. Now, of course, we focus on our financial situation, but recently customer satisfaction has been added as one of our key values. In addition, sustainable business is also very important to us. Not only in our strategy, but also in our way of working. We really want to embed this into our culture. At a.s.r. we have a diverse portfolio of products. So, for example, our pension products, mortgages, and life products. And each business line constitutes of its own product, with its own product team, marketing team, and financial team. And we are therefore considered a decentralized organization. Well, of course, we have some central organs as well. So, for example, the HR department or my department, innovation and digital. At my department, we focus on the website, on business innovations, and on innovative data analytics. And that's where my team comes in, the analytics lab. We serve the business with all sorts of data-related questions. We're a team of 7 people with really different backgrounds, and we try to help the business with data science and data engineering questions. And our role is to inspire the business for data-driven strategies and business improvements. I joined this team this past year, and my role has been focusing on setting up a process mining strategy. And so the question that I tried to answer this past year is, how can I approach process mining in such a large decentralized organization? And to be able to give a thoughtful response to this question, I realized I had to get my feet dirty and had to start building use cases. And so that's what I did. And what I want to do today is introduce these use cases to you and show you how we approach each use case, because in the end, that helped us a lot into trying to answer this question. The first case that I'll be discussing with you today is the medical reports case. At a.s.r. we have a claim department where the claims are handled, but sometimes they need additional information. So, for example, they need additional medical information about the claim, and they can do this at our medical secretariat. At this medical secretariat, they process all the information so that the doctor can write a medical report, which is then sent back to our claim handler. Now, at this medical secretariat, we have around 15,000 documents that are received yearly, and they directly process these documents. However, interestingly, only these documents are used when our claim handler actually requests a medical report. And sometimes the opposing party already sends these documentations before the claim handler requests such a medical report. The goal of this analysis was to find out how we could improve this process. And the advantage of this case was that we had one siloed department. So the team manager really wanted us to come up with concrete improvements for this process. And they worked in one workflow system, so it was rather easy for us to get the data for this project. And then we put it into Disco and we saw this. Now, I already saw this for some other presentations as well, so I was happy that I was not the only one. And the first thing that we had to do is find out what level of abstraction was needed to be able to do the analysis. And actually, as it turned out, a rather abstract level already gave us a lot of information. So what you can see here is the first step in the process is assessing a file. That means that at the secretariat, when information or something is received, they open a new file in case when there's not a file open yet. And now what you can see is that the next step that often happens is processing information. After the information is processed, the medical secretariat can prepare the medical advice. And then when the claim handler asks for a medical advice report, they can send the request to the doctors who write the medical report. Then they send it back to the medical secretariat, which assess the advice and send it back to the claim handler. Now, there's already some interesting things you can see here, but the most interesting insight was about processing the information. So what you see here is that a lot of information is processed, but that only for 70% of the cases, this information is used for a medical report. So a lot of information is being processed that it never turns into a medical report, and that is really inefficient for the process. And so we discussed this with the team manager, and what we did is we created an advice report. Like I said, it was the team manager was really wanted to have a concrete report with insights and advices on what he could improve. And so we wrote this all in an advice report. And one of the things that we told him is maybe it's better to transform the workflow around. So instead of processing the information directly, he could wait, or the employees could wait and only process the information when the claim handler would actually request a medical report. I think the advantage of this approach is that the manager was really convinced with our ideas. He had some gut feeling already about this situation, but visualizing this with process mining really helped him to use these insights and deliver a concrete advice. Now, the disadvantage of this approach, I think, was that it was a rather static result. Delivering this report, I'm not sure if we reached the employees directly, and I think that was the challenge in this case, because in the end, we want to drive change, and our goal is not to visualize the process, but our goal is to drive change by visualizing the process. So in this case, the data says something, but the employees worked for many years in this way. So it was interesting to find out if they would really change the process. And as it turned out, what we decided to do is do some more presentations with them and introduce process mining to them so that we would guide the advice report a bit more. Now, I think that this approach is not specific for a large decentralized organization, but I think that this is the case for many places where you can work. Because the advantage here was that it was only one department. However, like I said, we are a large decentralized organization, and it's not always the case that that the process is concerned with only one department. So that's why I want to introduce the second case to you, which is our complaints case. At a.s.r, like I said, we focus on customer satisfaction, and we have a central organ that guides the complaints workflow for the business lines. So all the complaints are guided within the same process workflow, and the central organ makes sure that everything is organized in the same way. Because we would like that each business line solves a complaint in the same high standard that we want to set. And the goal of the central organ is to standardize this process for each business line to make sure that the KPIs are all met. Now, initially they requested to have insights in the global process. So, for example, what they wanted to see is the process different for customers that are happy versus customers that are sad? But actually, when we did the analysis, about halfway through, we found out that it was more interesting to do a business line specific analysis. Because like I said, the goal of the central organ was to standardize the process, but actually that was not yet the case. Each business line had a really specific process or throughput time. And so what we did is we created process visualizations, like this one, for each business lines. And what we wanted to create is some sort of common ground where the central organ, together with us, could talk to these business lines to be able to discuss the process flow for them specifically and see where there was room for improvement. So, for example, to give you an idea, this is the reaction time of the customer. So when we receive the complaint until when we get a confirmation from the specific business line that we received the complaint, we have a KPI set for 3 reaction days, and we could easily and quickly analyze this per business line if this KPI was met, and if it wasn't met, where in the process this delay took place. But also, for example, after we confirmed to the customer that we received the complaint, we have the claim handler needs to give a response to the claim. And what we could see is that for some processes, it took a lot longer than the average for each business line. And so we could talk to this business line and discuss with them why this was the case for their business line specifically. And I think this was very valuable for the central organ. And so what we're doing is creating process workshops with each business line to discuss these insights. And the central organ, they're the ones that guide this process workshop. But creating this process visualization, like I said, helps to focus on where you can improve. So for example, some business lines needed to focus on the beginning of the process and others needed to focus on the tail of the process. But creating this visualization and these workshops really helped the central organ. So coming back, was this the best approach? Well, I think that it was good because we were able to convince each business line about their own process flow. So instead of having some vague overall process, we could really dive into their process, especially because each complaint can be very different. And we could discuss with them what was happening and how we could improve specific parts. However, the disadvantage was that we did not integrate all the business lines in the beginning. And so I think that was the challenge here, to really formulate the correct research question. Because at first we thought we were going to give an answer to the central organ and give them interesting insights. But like I said, halfway through, we realized that we would help the central organ more if we would help them telling the story to their business lines. And so we did not want to give insights to the central organ, but we wanted to give aids to the central organ, which they could use to give insights to the business lines. I think it was important for us to realize this, and if we would have thought about it a bit longer in the beginning, maybe we would have already come to this research question, and then we could have integrated the business lines earlier on in the stage. Because now I realized during these process workshops that it sometimes takes quite some time to get people familiar with process mining, whereas I'd rather get into the insights that we generated. As you can see, compared to the first case, this is really a different scenario because the central organ was a different stakeholder in this situation, or they were not even part of the process. So we had to think of another way in which we could help them to deliver insights and really create impact for them. And the third case that I want to discuss with you is our Life Product Expiration case. Again, this stakeholder was really different compared to the other two because it was the data team that requests us to help them in their business line. So at our life product business line, yearly there are thousands of expirations of life products. And what customers can do is they can call one of our employees to be able to get their life product paid out. But they can also go online to get this done, or they can go to an advisor. And since this past year, there's been a full focus on setting up a straight-through process in the online customer domain. And what the data team wanted is they wanted to improve the data-driven strategy at the department. So they did not have a specific process where they wanted to look for specific improvements, but they came to us with a request to improve the data-driven strategy, which is rather a broad scope. And so we really had to think of a way of how we could use process mining to set this up. And while I was thinking about the best approach, looking back to the other two cases, we really delivered a one-time insight report or a one-time process workshop. But I figured in this case, if we want to change the mindset of people, delivering insights for one time is not going to change their mindset. So we need to do it more often and more quickly. And so we came up with more of an agile process mining approach, in which we set up hypotheses at the beginning of a sprint. Each sprint takes about 4 weeks. And after we set the hypotheses, we extract the data, analyze the data, talk to process experts to understand the data, and then come back with the insights. And so we really created some sort of continuous testing strategy. And with this agile way of working, we could quickly test the hypotheses and deliver results within the business. And then hopefully these insights can be used for a more data-driven improvement strategy. So for example, what we would like to do is when improvements are made in the process, we would like to have the pre-situation and then afterwards test again to see what the effect was of the improvement on the throughput time, for example. The advantage of this approach was that we created a more robust process mining environment at the department. So we really tried to think of a way how we could set this up and not have a one-time data dump, but set it up in a way where we could quickly generate the data and also adjust the data to our needs, so to be able to test different hypotheses. The disadvantage in this approach is that it took a lot of time before the managers are familiar with the approach. We had to take small steps. And actually, like I said in the prior case as well, it takes a lot of time to get people convinced about process mining. At least that's what I experienced. And so the challenge here was to get the managers on board, because in the beginning, we were the ones setting up the hypotheses and testing them. But at the end, we want the managers to come up with these hypotheses, because then the insights will be a lot more relevant for them, and they can really use that in their way of working. So that instead of doing something based on gut feeling, they can actually do it because they saw it in the data. Well, as you can see, each approach of these three cases was rather different. And so coming back to the question that I started this presentation with, how did I approach process mining in such a large decentralized organization? I think it doesn't come as a surprise to you that I think that you need a diversified case-specific approach. And so what I think is that there's not a golden key for one specific process mining approach, but it's important to understand what the question is that you try to answer and the context of the question, so to be able to deliver more impact and value to the business line. Now, of course, I'd rather know in advance what the best approach would be instead of finding this out halfway throughout the project. And so what we did is an additional analysis to see how these three cases scored on different elements and see which elements were most important for these specific approaches. Because then we can use this for future cases to be able to determine the best approach. So the first element that we analyzed was the goal of the analysis. So like I said, for the first case, we really focused on delivering improvement ideas in the process. Whereas for our third case, for example, it was more about monitoring the process for continuous evaluation. And for our second case, the goal of the analysis was to evaluate the KPIs for each business line and to find possible improvements that were relevant for each business line. The second element that we found important was the KPI of the process. We can talk about workload or consistency and lead time of the process, or improving the straight-through process numbers in a process. So all different KPIs that they wanted to analyze. And of course, the data type and data shape is also very important. And actually, to give it a bit more detailed, the data availability is very important. So like I said, for the first two cases, we focused more, it was more of a one-time data dump out of the system that we analyzed. Whereas for our third case, I worked really closely with the data analyst and to be able to make some sort of pipeline that we could use to extract the data and manipulate it in such a way that we could directly plug and play it into the Disco data or Disco software, and so that we could analyze it very quickly. Without the data analyst, this would not have been possible. And the last element that we found important is the stakeholder's position in the organization. So, what I think is very important, very interesting, is for the second case that the central organ of the complaints department was more of a consultancy team. So they were not the ones guiding a direct process, but they were guiding actually maybe 10 different processes for each business line. And so we had to think of a way how we could help them to deliver the insights. Whereas for our first case, we had a very siloed department, and the team manager in this case, he could easily make changes to the process because he did not have many other stakeholders that he was concerned with. And for our third case, it was also an interesting stakeholder because the data team, they were also not concerned directly with the process, but they had a very clear vision of wanting to stimulate data-driven management. And so what you can see is that each case scores differently on these elements. And that also led to the different approaches. But I don't think that each element is as important for all these cases. So for example, for our first case, where we had the advice report, I think this was mainly valuable because we can see the goal of the analysis was really focusing on delivering concrete improvements, and because we had a stakeholder that could easily implement these improvements. If we would have done this for our complaint department, it would have taken a lot more struggle to convince the business lines to work with these improvements. For our second case, we had the process workshops. And I think this was mainly the most valuable approach, because we really wanted to create a consistent lead time throughout these different business lines. And by comparing each business line individually, we could easily see where in the process each business line had room for improvement. And also, like I already mentioned, the central organ was more of a consultancy team, and we could help them guide the process for all these business lines. Now, for our third case, we had more of a continuous testing strategy, and I think that this was mainly only possible because we worked with the data analyst. So without this data analyst, it would not have been that easily to extract all this data so quickly from different scopes that we had. And also, this was really the most valuable approach, I think, because we wanted to monitor the process in a way so that we could change the mindset at the business line. So what you can see is that each case had a different approach, and that there were different elements for each case that actually led to this approach. And what I would like to do now for our next step is create some sort of framework or formalize this approach a bit more so that we can use this with future cases. Especially because a.s.r. is a large decentralized organization, and hopefully I'm not going to be the only one using process mining. I want to take the learnings from all these cases and put them in a framework so that each business line could use process mining for themselves and find out which approach would work best for their case before they start the case. But yeah, this is my experience at a.s.r., and I'm curious to think what you guys do when you start a process mining case. Do you have a specific approach that you take, or do you just trial and error as you go? I would really like to discuss this with you tomorrow in our Q&A, or shoot me an email or catch me on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nelleke. Thanks for sharing these three cases and a very clear topic for discussion for our community. So I'm also really curious what people have to say about it and what their own experience is with these different forms of collaboration in the organization for process mining, and when which approach is suitable and when it isn't. So let's see what they have to say. I saw already some questions coming up. So for example, maybe we can address that already quickly. So Marcus was wondering about how difficult it was to define the overall KPIs, which have to cover different business lines, and get them to agree, on the different shares in these KPIs. If they're working together, they're probably responsible for a part of the KPI. So I think that's what he's referring to for the second case. Yeah.
So the central organ, I think, because we as a.s.r. decided that our customer satisfaction is very important, and we decided to have the central organ for our complaints. They were the ones that could decide what KPIs would work best, and it's actually the complaints process is very important to us to do it well. So these KPIs have been set by the central organ a while ago, and so they already had a clear idea about their process, actually how they wanted to have it. So that helped us to deliver these insights, if that answers the question.
Right. Okay, great. Yes, about these workshops that you had with these different business lines in that case, I was also wondering, so what you often see as the process miner is that you're maybe starting to dig in the data, you're doing some first analysis, you're dealing with the whole spaghetti situation, right? Trying to get some readable and some still representative pictures that you can actually then show and use in such a workshop together with the people who then from these business lines are, of course, the domain experts, right? So they're working in these different groups, they know exactly what's going on, so they have this very clear understanding of what's actually the meaning behind those data points. And so I was curious, was there anything in those kind of workshops where you were showing them their own process, where they saw things that you wouldn't have picked up on, or that they pointed out, or something that you were surprised?
I think that, so we had two business lines they were helping us with the analysis from the beginning, but the other business lines weren't, but they already helped us to understand the process. So for example, we have a reminder that's set, so a date or a time point when there's a reminder that action needs to be taken. But this is actually not a set point. So some business lines use this reminder more for themselves to use it. So they would set it in a week in advance just as a standard reminder, and that wouldn't mean that they would necessarily use it. But in the data, we saw a lot of things going on with this reminder, and it was very different between the business lines. But as it turned out, one business line guided their employees to say, okay, use this reminder in this way, where the other business line guided their employees to say, hey, you should use the reminder in this way. So it was interesting to see how these different business lines use this reminder, and we could really see it in the data. It really reflected on the data.
Right, I think that's a really nice example. So on the data side, it looks really the same. It's the same type of event. The reminder takes place, so you see like the event pop up, but the meaning behind it was really different in these different business lines.
And yeah, I think for all the cases that I've done so far, that's the key point, is that we use the data to look from the outside or look from the backside what's happening, but you need to understand what's happening in the front side as well to be able to match these insights. So I find it very important to talk to this process specialist to be able to understand what the data is telling us, because if we can't reflect it to what's happening in the front, then it's difficult to deliver the insights to them. So I think that's very important.
Right. And that's probably one aspect that you're lacking a little bit in the scenario of the first case, where you just have to deliver a report, so you don't naturally you have a little less interaction. But did you also have a kind of a subject matter expert or someone in the team you could ask questions about?
Yeah. So I think there were 2 employees that I talked to, but it was a team of maybe 30 people that worked at a medical secretariat. So yeah, just delivering the insight report was not enough to change their mindset, I think. But I did talk to 2 of them, because that spaghetti was very, very unclear to me in the beginning. So yeah, they helped me with the process. But in the end, we still needed to really talk to all the employees and show them what process mining was doing, because we're not making up the data, but we're using your system to see what's happening. And once we got them convinced about that, it was easier to talk to them about the insights and what it could help them with.
Yes, that's such a good point, indeed. And you mentioned that also in your presentation, is that, convincing people, or let's say having really an impact with, if there's a very clear result, to actually get people to change something or to implement those recommendations to improve the process. That's of course one of the overall challenges in change management overall. But that specifically with process mining, I think you're right. It's really these 2 areas you need. These subject matter experts to work with you to understand the data and to be able to deal with the spaghetti and things like that. But then also at the same time, by involving them, you actually increase the buy-in and increase the chances for them to do something and to own those results in the end. Yeah,
that's really something I experienced as well. Because at first I thought, when we have an interesting data insight, that's the solution. But then I realized that insight does not equal change. There's a lot more that needs to be done. But yeah, that's part of the process.
Yeah, that's a good tagline anyway. Insight does not equal change. I think we should all remind ourselves of that. Right. And about the third case, I just had also one question about who was actually doing the process mining part there. You mentioned the goal was to enable managers to ask questions quickly, to get them to give them this ability, but probably they were not doing the process mining part, were they?
No. So I was working together with the data analyst to extract the data, but also to analyze the data. So actually, because what we want in the end is that they will do the process mining themselves. So I'm just talking to all these business lines about process mining, but we want to integrate process mining within these business lines. So I'm working closely with him to extract the data, but also to analyze the data. And then we deliver those insights to the managers. And so we have demos after every sprint to show what we've done and to show people who are interested how we came to the specific conclusions.
Right. Okay, great. Yes. So, well, this is also brings me to the last question that I have for today. Is you mentioned that you have, in this position, you have explained process mining a lot, right? And that even sometimes maybe it was you would have liked to focus more on the analysis itself, like in these workshops, for example. But of course, people have to understand which approach you're using. So, in this whole kind of year of practicing to explain process mining to others, is there something that you learned that could be useful for other people who are in the same situation, who have to explain process mining to colleagues who don't know about it at all, that you maybe wish you would have known, or that makes it easier or helps in explaining the topic?
That's a good question, and there's a lot of things that pop in my head, but I'll think about it some more and come back with that tomorrow for sure too. But I think a lot of people try to see, or a lot of colleagues tell me is, I could do the same analysis in other tools, or they could get the same answer of a specific result in another way. And to be able to convince other people, process mining is not going to replace all the other techniques, but it's an additional tooling that can be used to give you some focus on where you should do additional analysis. So I think I wouldn't fight that battle of trying to convince other people that process mining is the best tool. It's just an additional tool that's very useful to give insights in where you want to do additional analysis.
Great. Okay, great. I think that's the perfect place to end for today. Yes. So everyone, please join the discussion in our Slack community. Yes. Nelleke will be back tomorrow at the same time.
Yeah, definitely.
Then we will address those questions and continue the discussion.
Sounds good. See you tomorrow.
Thanks, Nelleke. Thank you all for joining. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye. Welcome back, everyone, to the 5th day of Process Mining Camp this year. We're back today at the beginning with our daily Process Mining Cafe, where we welcome back the speaker from the previous day. And so welcome back, Nelleke.
Yes. Hello. Thank you, Anna. Hi. Good to be back.
Great. You saw that there were already quite some discussions after your presentation yesterday. Is there anything that you saw that piqued your attention?
No, I think there were some very good ideas out there, and that made me think again about the approach as well and our next steps that we want to take. So, a lot to learn and to take into.
Right. Yes. So we ended yesterday's discussion a little bit on the topic of: did you learn anything when you explain process mining to people in the organization?
Yeah, so actually I wanted to add a bit onto that answer that I gave yesterday, because I was thinking about it a bit more last night. And actually what I learned this past year is that I've done a lot of talking to people and really trying to convince them that process mining is the way to go. But the best way for me is to get them excited is to simply press the animation button and show them the yellow balls, and then they're all excited, and everything I said is basically not important anymore. So that would be my advice to people that start with process mining. Show them the visualization, because that really makes the process come alive, and that's what really works.
That's so interesting that you say that, because sometimes I see people, especially if they're a little bit more technically minded, to a little bit doubtful, like, oh, that's it's just a play thing, or, it doesn't really mean anything or something, like for the animation. But what my experience as well is that it's particularly helpful in explaining people or letting them understand first of all, what a process is often, right? If you're not like a process analyst or someone who's dealing and modeling processes all day. So just the idea that, this is the dynamic process flow, it's something that helps people to intuitively understand that and connect to that. And if it's then their process, that's, I think a very good point.
Yeah, I'm getting so much into the conversation, and I'm showing the numbers and the throughput time. And then I almost forget to show it, and then my colleagues tell me, "Oh, you should show the visualization, because then they'll understand." And then everybody's always remembers the yellow balls floating through. So
right, okay, it's a great communication mechanism, absolutely. So that's good. But I think what you said yesterday also still holds, is that it's important to explain to people that process mining does not replace these other tools that they might be using, like query tools or other statistical tools or something, but that it's really something that comes in addition and is a nice complement to these other existing tools. And that's also a remark that Marcus made in the community discussion, where he said, like, in his experience, that process mining specifically helps to quickly identify problem areas. Especially if you maybe don't know yet what you're looking for, and this kind of explorative way of working, that's really, I think, one of the aspects that makes process mining particularly powerful and is different compared to other more kind of maybe programming or deterministic oriented techniques.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the comment. For example, also for our second case, where we had the KPIs for the business lines about the complaint process. Mm-hmm. So we had very set KPIs for each process that was the same, but doing the analysis, we found out that specific steps in the process were different for each business line. And so maybe they should use different KPIs for them specifically to finally add this on to the major KPIs. But we could really show the focus point for each business line, and other tools could be used to do additional analysis, but it really helped us to explore and find out, okay, what steps in the process are different for each business line. So yeah, totally agree.
Right. Yeah, and I think so in the community he also gave a nice example of one of his own analysis from a central warehouse where there was a similar situation. What I also saw in the community feedback is that people really appreciated the analysis that you've done of these different approaches and what were maybe the key factors or making which approach suitable for which situation. And for example, Fritz and Youssef really liked this diversity of approach and the overview of that. And Santiago said that gives a lot of ideas about how to introduce process mining in their own organization. So that's nice.
It's good to hear. If they ever want to catch up and learn some more about it, or maybe we can discuss some things, then they can always send me a message.
Yes, okay, that's great. And then also people had some additional questions and were curious to learn some more details about certain aspects of what you've done in your process mining work so far. For example, one set of questions related very much to the process mining competency that needs to be built up in the organization. So Fran was wondering about this. Rudy, Olga wanted to know about it. So for example, Rudy was asking, how do you organize the capability to support these decentralized projects, right? Do you do this within the teams, within the business lines? Do you build up competency there? Or do you have a center of excellence with the best practices? And who would be driving this? So I think it's a good point. So where are you right now on this?
So I think that's also a very good point, and that's actually the center of the discussion that we're into right now, to be honest. We see some advantages of creating a center of excellence, but at the same time, because we're a decentralized organization, we don't have one central data warehouse. So each business line has their own data warehouse and their own structure or their own way in which the data is structured. So it's right now, I think what we will try to do is create a structure whereby we have a central contact point. So, for example, I'm going to be the central spider in the web, we would say, to discuss everything with the business lines, and we'll create some sort of process mining team maybe between the business lines. But I think the most effective way for us to set it up is where each business line has their own process miner, so to say. And what I would like to do is guide them in the pre-analysis and the post-analysis. So see how we can add on to Disco and make the analysis even more insightful, so that at each business line there's a process miner who can work with Disco and do the analysis for that specific business line. And then I can help them and advise them in the process of using Disco. So that's how I see it right now, but we still really have to get into it and see how quickly people can use it themselves and get acquainted with it.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So it's also probably so Eddie was asking, and that's what you've answered partly now already, is like, has it been your aim that more staff get involved with process mining themselves, and so that they start their own process mining projects, or will this be something that's going to be centrally initiated? So it sounds like the goal would be to have people in these individual business lines to build up experience and competency themselves, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because I think the advantage of doing it this way is that I already recognize a lot of colleagues that I talk to from these different business lines. They have a lot of experience with the processes within the business lines.
Right.
So they already know specific parts of the process, and they can understand the data aspect of the process faster than I can. So I think I could help them with setting up such a project, and can help them to think of the best approach in the way they could set up the project. But in the end, it's going to be deliver more value to the business line if they would do the analysis. And actually, there's a lot of employees that are excited about it, so I don't think there will be an issue to get other colleagues on board.
Right. Yes, and it's a little bit also, especially related to the third case, the approach that you took there, right? I mean, if that's something that is possible to set up or to build up the competency in the particular area so that they can do their own analysis, it's exactly what you're just saying. They have the domain experience and the domain knowledge, so they know these processes. So if they can then quickly do these analysis themselves, that really that brings the biggest impact for them on a daily basis.
And then, we can roll it out a lot faster as well, I think. So with the last case, we're still in that process, actually, and we're really transforming it now that at first I was doing the analysis, and now one of my colleagues at the Life department is doing the analysis, and I'm helping him in doing the analysis. So he's the one touching all the buttons, so to say, and thereby learning how to use it. So that's, I think, very useful because, especially in such a continuous analysis strategy, they need to be analyzing in some sort of continuous manner. They need to do this more frequently than I could do it for them. So we really want them to learn the technique and use it.
Yeah, so that they are independent. And in a way, it reminds me also of isn't it, in the lean, the whole lean methodology, right? Or Lean Six Sigma, when this is being built up as a process improvement methodology in organizations, many of these companies then also choose for as much as possible. You do need a certain kind of analytic thinking or some affinity to do some sort of data analysis. Not every employee will have that, but many people who are very much on the operational side in the business lines themselves do actually have the skills to be able to pick up process mining. So if you can place it there, that's really valuable. And at the same time, what we also see at many companies who do apply process mining in different places, it is valuable to try to find a structure that enables sharing experiences, right? So if there's 3 different teams, for example, busy with process mining in different business units, it's useful to find some way to come together every now and then in some kind of regular format to share what they have been doing and to keep learning and also get the coaching from your side. So that's probably going to be a mix in some form.
That's how I imagine it as well, because we want to, of course, share best practices with each other and not make the same mistake twice. So definitely we're gonna be talking to each other about that. But I also want to have the advantage of the knowledge of the business line. So I think it will be a good mix to have a little bit of both.
Right. Okay, great. So another set of questions that came up in the community is relating to to how you can Will and Rudy were asking about it, how to organize the capability of extracting and preparing the data, or how to quickly obtain current data for the people. So that basically enables this quick feedback loop. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit how you've done it, for example, for this third case right now, and how you're thinking about doing this in the future.
Yeah, so I saw the question as well. Also, I think they asked if we already used Airlift, which we're not yet. So we're looking into that and see how we could apply that to the last case. I think, so my idea behind this is that Disco is a really powerful tool and rather easy to use for people that are not very data-minded. So how I would like to see it is that I can help these process miners in the business line by doing the pre-step and the post-analysis and maybe additional analysis with them. So, for example, with the data preparation for the third case, actually just the data analyst gets some data with the SQL query, and then we run some Python scripts, and then we put it into Disco. And then in these Python scripts, we can do different filters to be able to change our scope. So the Life Product Expiration process that I talked about yesterday, it's a very diverse and very complex process. So using these filters, we can quickly scope to specific parts of the process and then only implement this part that we find relevant. But we're still trying to develop this in a more structured manner and learning as we go.
Right. Yeah, that's another piece of the puzzle to get right, to set up the whole infrastructure for process mining.
Yeah, and also I'm really thinking now how can we use the data, because I think the data is very valuable, and it's very valuable to put into Disco, but also can we do additional analysis after we've put it into Disco? So how can we use this data that we already got in an additional manner? So that's where I'm thinking of how can we add extra value for the business, so that the people that work with Disco can really focus on their Disco analysis, but also can get even more powerful insights with the data that they already have.
Right. Yeah, and that is something that people are becoming more and more aware of, right? That they know that we have this data, so they're actually open and interested in learning about new ways of making use of that data in different ways.
Exactly.
Okay, great. So, another point that I wanted to come back to is the analysis that you've made of these different dimensions for the 3 different approaches that you had, and you identified the goal of the analysis, stakeholders, type of data, and the KPIs, and they were analyzed. And you highlighted nicely like how different aspects of these different dimensions were important in basically choosing one of these approaches for how to deliver the process mining project. And so one thing you were wondering also is, are there other dimensions that perhaps could be added into this framework to do this kind of comparison? And so one thing that perhaps could be added based on also the feedback from the community was maybe the way you deal with the business impact. So of course the analysis is being done in a certain form, but then how do you follow up on those insights to actually make sure the actual change happens in the organization, right? That was a comment that Marcus made, like how do you deal with the business impact in these different approaches? So do you think that could be a dimension to add?
Yeah. Definitely. I think it's very important to understand what the impact will be of the analysis that you're doing, to be able to deliver it in such a way that will add value without creating hiccups in the organization. So it's very important to understand what the impact will be for each case and take this into your approach, or take this into account for your approach.
Right. And also that's also in a way also coming back again to the competency dimension in terms of who's driving this, right? Who's responsible. And so, for example, I think once in the first case, what you mentioned there is that the process owner or process manager, they basically approached you because they had this problem and this question that they wanted to get solved. So in this situation, they were really interested in the results that you presented to them. But that's something that I've also seen at other companies, is that if you are building up this capability of process mining, as it's in a way something that you're offering to your to other parts of the organization, but the demand or the question needs to come from them, right? So it's no use if you're like, it doesn't matter whether you're an innovation or like a data science or some process improvement department. If you're going to a business unit and you're doing an analysis report for them, you show them this should be improved. If they're not interested in this question, then they're not going to do anything with it. So
true.
That's like
It sometimes feels a bit like a catch-22. So sometimes you need the process analysis before you can find out what the insights will be. But so you need to know in advance what you want to analyze. But at the same, so it's a bit. You never really know what you will get out of it. But I think it's always going to be beneficial for the organization. And what I try to do is really find out how is giving insights going to help the stakeholder that I'm talking to. So trying to find out not how it's helping him, but how it's helping their stakeholders. So take it one step further and find out, okay, how can we deliver value to his or her stakeholders? And then see how process mining can help with that. So I find that a challenge too, because sometimes I have to prove that it's going to deliver insights, but I can only prove this when I've done the insight before. So,
it's you're completely right. That's really like a chicken and egg you're running into there. Right, but so I think, as a resume for this framework, that could be a suggestion to expand these 4 dimensions that you identified by maybe 1 or maybe 2 additional dimensions. And one dimension could be the business impact approach, or how you're ensuring that the change or the follow-up actually happens after the analysis. And the second dimension, relating back to how to set up the competency in the organization, could be the factor like who's doing the analysis, right? Is it an analyst who's being trained in the particular business unit, or are people doing this themselves, or are they just participating in workshops and a central team is doing this?
Definitely. I think sitting in the corner of the office and doing the analysis myself is going to make it a lot harder in my approach in driving change. But whereas if a data analyst would do the analysis for the business line, it's a lot easier to drive this change because they're the ones driving the change and delivering the insights. So it depends a lot on each approach. How, for example, these process workshops are really important to be able to demonstrate the value of process mining and to get people on board. but if they are already doing the analysis themselves, then maybe that's not really necessary because they already know their process and they know what they're doing. So it really depends on, like you say, who's doing the analysis and how this affects the approach. So good point. I could add that in the framework, definitely.
Great. Okay, great. Well, then we have one last question that we can close with. Is that Roel was wondering how do you think now, having done this for the past year or so, how much have you succeeded so far to establish process mining as an analysis technique that is seen as an important tool in the organization?
Seems like a hard question, grading myself right now for this past year. But I think I feel like we're getting there, but I need a bit more time to really get it set into the company. So for a big company, it just takes a lot of time, a lot of talking to people before you get everybody on board or to get enough people on board. But I feel like we're getting there now, that I'm not the only one talking about process mining anymore, but I found some other crazy people that want to talk about process mining at a.s.r, and that's good. So they can tell the story and they can approach other people, and I think then it's going to go a lot faster. So hopefully, I think next year when the camp will be the same time around, I think we should have a center of excellence ready, or at least some sort of process mining team at a.s.r in the business lines that spread out the story even more. So that's my
goal. Great to hear. And so probably you have quite a bit more of explaining to do to get there, and that's what's coming next.
True, but that's still exciting. So exciting times ahead.
Right. All right. Okay. Well, thanks so much for coming back today for this follow-up discussion and for sharing your experience and your cases with us. We will continue the discussion in the community. So if you have more questions for Nelleke or own ideas or approaches that you want to share with us, please continue adding them in the a.s.r channel in the Slack community. Right now, we are going to into a quick break, and then we will be back quarter to the hour with our practice talk for today.
Sounds good. Enjoy.
Thanks. Bye-bye.